What does the 2021-2022 schedule look like for the Minnesota Wilds? We find out today on Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked On Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we take a look at the 2021-2022 season schedule for the Minnesota Wild, broken down by opponents' winning percentage from last season. We'll see which months are going to be the most difficult, which months give the Wild an opportunity to make a run, and an interesting scheduling quirk that gives the Wild a bevy of home games down the stretch. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Wild, brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and make sure to tell them Locked On sent you. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer, heading into my first full season as host of Locked On Wild. Happy to have you along for our bonus episode here today. So technically, this is your second listen of the day, but still first show listen of the day. So thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us here on this Tuesday. Now, as mentioned, we're going to be taking a look at the 2021-2022 schedule for the Wild, and we'll break it down by month. Went through the whole thing and tried to chart it based off of opponents' winning percentage to see where the Wild have the most potential difficulty, which months are going to be easy, which months are going to present a challenge. And turns out the Wild have a great end to the season with a ton of home games. So a pretty good season. Plus, we also get the Olympic break as well in the month of February. So should give the Wild an opportunity to really have a good year if they can just get through the schedule and win the games that they should. Um, this is going to be a playoff team again, which is exactly what we want. So, and forgive me, I have this all on a spreadsheet, so I will be charting that several times. Let's start by looking at the month of October. The Wilds play 8 games in the month of October, and it's a pretty even split. 3 at home, 5 on the road. Goes like this. They play Anaheim on the road to start off the season on Friday. Then they play at the LA Kings on Saturday. Then home on the 19th against Winnipeg. Home on the 23rd against Anaheim. Home on the 24th against Nashville. Then away on the 26th at Vancouver. Away on the 28th for the first time to play the Seattle Kraken. And finishing off the month on the 30th away against the Colorado Avalanche. Looking at the wins and losses for those teams combined this past season, they went 178 and 213, accounting for losses and overtime losses as well. So that was a 455 winning percentage for Wild's opponents in the month of October. And you look at it, of those 8 games, 3 games coming against teams that were above 500. And so should be able to beat Anaheim twice, should be able to beat the Kings, should be able to beat Vancouver in that span. And if you, at worst, come out of that month of October at something like 5-3, I think that is going to I think that's going to present a great opportunity for the Wild to get a good start. And let's say maybe you steal one from the likes of Winnipeg, Nashville, or Colorado. Then all of a sudden you're sitting at at the 6-2 mark through the first 8 games, and I think that's where the confidence can start to build. I did not factor anything in for the Kraken because, well, they didn't exist last year, and it sounds like Seattle is dealing with some COVID-related issues, so we are probably getting them at a point where their roster is not going to be as strong as it will be later in the season. So that could be a win as well for this Wild team. A gritty one, though, because they do still have Philip Grubauer, just not a whole lot in the way of offense on the other end. So 8 games wouldn't surprise me if the Wild go something like 5-3, but again, anything above that is certainly a plus for the Wild. Now, November is going to be a really tough one for the Wild because you look at the combined winning percentage of the teams that they're playing, it's 527. They go Ottawa at home on November 2nd. November 6th, they play away at Pittsburgh. Then on the 7th, they're home against the New York Islanders. On November 10th, away against the Arizona Coyotes. The 11th, away against the Vegas Golden Knights. The 13th, away against Seattle. Home against the San Jose Sharks on the 16th. Home against Dallas on the 18th. On the 20th, at the Florida Panthers. Then on the 21st, at the Tampa Bay Lightning. 24th, away against the New Jersey Devils. 25th, at home against the Winnipeg Jets. 28th, at home against Tampa Bay. And the 30th, home against Arizona. Combined wins and losses for teams in the month of November against the Wild is 382 and 342. Obviously, you get your first look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Those are going to be very tough games for the Wild. It's a tough matchup going up against that kind of goaltending and a team that has won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. But I think the Wild will have a decent chance in those games. But you see the likes of San Jose and Arizona this month, New Jersey, uh, and even some of those teams that were just above 500, like Winnipeg, presents an opportunity for some wins. So a chance for the Wild here. Even if they can go right around 500 in the month of November, put themselves in a spot where they're in pretty good shape through the first 2 months of the season before the schedule really kind of starts to open up in the final couple of months of the year. So through October and November, um, 22 games in for the Wild. Would not surprise me if they are above 500 at that point and have a chance to make some nice noise in the Central Division. We will turn our attention to the month of December and January and February as we continue to navigate through the Wild's 2021-2022 schedule. More to come here on today's episode of Locked On Wild. BetOnline.ag is back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron as teams are back for another football season. And as always, BetOnline.ag is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With a new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline.ag continues to be the number one source for everything football. So head over to betonline.ag on your laptop or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to use that promo code LOCKED ON to receive that welcome bonus. From football, basketball, boxing, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. That's betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all of that entertainment you love without the hassle and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Directv Stream, and it brings your live TV and on demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There is no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with Directv Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Continuing with today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day, although technically this would be your second listen here today. Nonetheless, make sure that your second show that you listen to here today is the Crosschecks live NHL season preview show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. That'll be tonight from 5 to 6 p.m. Central Time on the Locked On NHL YouTube page. Andrew and Mary tee up the new NHL season with a look at the key storylines surrounding the league, featuring drop ins from our roster of local NHL hosts, fantasy insights from Locked On Fantasy Hockey Scott Cullen, an award and Stanley Cup playoff predictions. That is tonight from 5 to 6 p.m. Central Time on the Locked On NHL YouTube page. Continuing with our look at the 2021-2022 schedule for the Minnesota Wild, we looked at October and November. On to the month of December. Wild have 11 games in December, and the month looks like this. They start the month on the 2nd, home against New Jersey, then home against the Toronto Maple Leafs on December 4th. After that, a 4-game road trip at Edmonton on the 7th, at San Jose on the 9th, at the LA Kings on the 11th, and at Vegas on the 12th. Then home against Carolina on the 14th, home against Buffalo on the 16th, home against Florida on the 18th, a quick road swing to Dallas on the 20th, then home to finish off the month against Detroit on the 23rd, and away against Winnipeg on the 27th. So a pretty even split there. Winning percentage for Wild's opponents in December came in at .492. So again, a winnable stretch for them with games against New Jersey, San Jose, the LA Kings, Buffalo, Dallas, Detroit. You even throw Winnipeg in there. And, maybe you end up coming away with one of the two against Toronto and Edmonton. Again, I don't really see any reason why the Wild can't finish above 500 here in the month of December. And, it's all about just winning those games that you should and trying to take a couple of the games that you maybe aren't expected to win, such as that 2-game stretch on the road against Vegas and then home against the Carolina Hurricanes. Maybe you win one of those games. Florida as well on the 18th at home. The Wild could certainly steal a few at XL Energy Center this year and really improve their mark over what they are expected to do. So that is the month of December. The month of January features 12 games. The Winter Classic on January 1st against the St. Louis Blues. Then on January 3rd, on the road against Ottawa. January 6th, on the road against Boston, before coming back home on the 8th for a game against the Washington Capitals. Then away against Winnipeg on the 10th. On the road against Edmonton on the 12th. Home against Anaheim on the 14th. On the road against Colorado on the 17th. On the road against Chicago for the first time this season on the 21st, and then home against Chicago on the 22nd. I do like the back-to-back home and road series with teams, and so that Chicago series is going to be a very good one for the Wild. Then after that, home against Montreal on the 24th, on the road against the New York Rangers on the 28th, and then the New York Islanders on the 30th to finish things off. Winning percentage for opponents based off of last year's games, 510, 371, and 356. So obviously right off the bat, winnable games against St. Louis and Ottawa. Then maybe you get one of two against Boston or Winnipeg. Boston or Washington, I should say. Winnipeg is a winnable game. Then Edmonton, Anaheim, Colorado, at least a split against Chicago. Montreal is a winnable game. And then maybe one of two against the Rangers and the Islanders. So 12 games, 7-5 8-4, maybe somewhere in there, would certainly be a great month of January for the Wild. Um, as we gear up. And again, a great stretch. The month of March, as we'll talk about in a little bit, that's the one where the Wild need to make a move if they're in a spot where they need to catch up some ground or in a potential spot to solidify themselves with the playoffs. We'll take a look at the month of February here too because the Olympic break thrown in as well. 3 road games in February for the Wild on the road on February 2nd against Chicago. Then on the 24th on the road against Toronto and on the road against Calgary on the 26th. 2-1. Pretty easy mark for the Wild to chase here. Should beat Chicago, should beat Calgary. Going to be interesting to see what happens with Toronto. So 2-1, maybe 3-0 in the month of February. And more importantly, the Olympic break for some, a chance for a few players to rest up and gear up for the final 2 months of the season, which we will talk about coming up in just a bit. A full deep dive into the 2021-2022 schedule continues next here on Locked On Wild. Today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? Let's be honest, who knows? And why wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? RockAuto.com is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and RockAuto.com's prices are reliably low for every customer. So head to RockAuto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Make sure to write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, all at rockauto.com. Final segment of today's bonus episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. 2 months left in the regular season schedule. The month of March, the busiest month for the Wild, as they have 15 games, starts March 1st at home against Calgary. Then March 3rd on the road against Philadelphia. March 4th on the road against Buffalo. March 6th home against Dallas. March 8th home against the New York Rangers. March 10th on the road against Detroit. March 11th on the road against Columbus. March 13th on the road again, or at home against Nashville. And this is significant because that is the first of 9 consecutive home games for the Minnesota Wild to close out the month. They are home against Nashville on the 13th, home against Boston on the 16th, home against Chicago on the 19th, home against Vegas on the 21st, home against Vancouver on the 24th, home against Columbus on the 26th, home against Colorado on the 27th, home against Philadelphia on the 29th, and home against Pittsburgh on the 31st. Winning percentage for Wild opponents. Records from last year come in at .423 and .473. A .472 winning percentage. The easiest month, ladies and gentlemen, for the Minnesota Wild on their schedule, other than the month of October. And as mentioned, those 9 consecutive home games from the 13th through the 31st. This is the month of March is the one where the Wild will either make a move or will solidify their spot in the playoffs based off of that just huge homestand to close out the month. You've got games, Calgary, Philadelphia, very winnable. Buffalo, Dallas, very winnable games. Detroit, Columbus, Chicago, Vancouver. It is the possibility that of those 15 games, you could see a 10-5 mark or higher for the Wild here. And that's going to be the opportunity for them to really gain ground or to push themselves into a position where they're firmly in. So keep in mind the month of March is going to be the one where the Wild either make a move or they solidify themselves in the playoffs. Um, because the month of April not daunting, but the month of April is a it's going to be interesting to see how things finish for the Wild as they've got 15 games again in April. Starts on the 2nd, away against Carolina, then away against Washington on the 3rd, away against Nashville on the 5th, and away against St. Louis on the 8th, home against the Kings on the 10th, home against Edmonton on the 12th, on the road against Dallas on the 14th, and then on the road against St. Louis on the 16th, home against San Jose on the 17th, away against Montreal on the 19th, home against Vancouver on the 21st, home against Seattle on the 22nd, on the road against Nashville on the 24th, and then 3-game homestand to finish off the regular season. Home against Arizona on the 26th, home against Calgary on the 28th, and home against Colorado on the 29th. Winning percentage of Wild opponents based off of last year's record for April, 504, a 424 and 416 mark. And, again, very winnable games. LA Kings, Dallas, San Jose, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary. We don't know what Seattle will be like, so that could definitely be a winnable game as well. And yeah, a good way to close out the season for the Wilds. But again, if you want to know when the Wild are going to make their move and solidify themselves, it's going to be in the month of March. March is make it or break it month for the Wild. And if they take care of business, then we'll be going to the playoffs. And if not, well, then we'll be doing the other thing, which is watching everybody that's in the playoffs. All of this cultivates in a total winning percentage for Wild opponents for the season of 496. 2,194 wins, 2,224 losses for Wild opponents. And again, that's not taking Seattle into account. Road winning percentage of teams that Wild will play on the road. So their opponent's winning percentage when the Wild go to play these teams is 505. The winning percentage of Wild's opponents at Xcel Energy Center, 487. So if the Wild take care of business at home and can hold serve on the road, that also is a very successful formula for this team and leads to them getting into the playoffs and maybe making a little noise as well. So there you have it. The schedule deep dive for today's bonus episode of Locked On Wild and a look at all of the games that the Wild have on the schedule, the months that will lead to the Wild having success and the months where if they can simply hold serve, they will be in very good shape. And should be an exciting season, which is just a couple of days away from starting, and cannot wait for that. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen here today. Want to make sure to again direct you to the Crosschecks live NHL season preview show tonight from 5 to 6 p.m. Central Time on the Locked On NHL YouTube page. Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark tee up the new NHL season with a look at the key storylines around the league, featuring drop-ins from our roster of local NHL hosts, fantasy insights from Locked On Fantasy Hockey's Scott Cullen, and award and Stanley Cup playoff predictions as well. That is tonight. You can make sure to follow us and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, make sure to check out our social media channels, which are getting tuned up and ready for the start of the season as well. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel. We will be continuing to drop content, including pregame videos as well as post games. A lot coming up from Locked On Wild. So make sure that you don't miss out on anything that we have to offer as Wild season approaches. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.